Welcome, everyone, to Courageous Creative Conquerors. This is Jean Voice Dart. It's my belief that everyone has a gift of creative expression. We were born to express ourselves to stay healthy and happy. Whether you are planting a garden, writing a story, building a cabinet, sewing a scarf, or singing a song, what matters is expressing from the heart. And the creative and expressive arts are a healthy coping strategy that shifts us from trauma to triumph. So join me as we listen and learn key tips and techniques from our special guest and courageous creative conqueror. My special guest today is Chris Charlotte, author, blogger, musician, philosopher, and creator. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jean Voice Dart, and this is Courageous Creative Conquerors. And my special guest today is Chris Charlotte from Wisconsin. And it's so much fun to have you here, Chris. Welcome.
Glad to be on the show.
Yeah.
Glad you're having me.
I'm very glad to have you. I don't often get creative men stepping forward. It seemed to be an abundance of women. So I'm really glad to have you here and sharing about creative writing and creativity in a number of other ways growing up. So let's get started, Chris. I would love for you to share a little bit about you growing up and what happened with you in terms of being creative. What creative opportunities did you have? So we have this slide here, this photo we're going to take a look at. And here you are. Tell me about this, Chris. What's happening here?
So when I was 9 or 10, I was living in northern Minnesota, a town called Bemidji. And we heard about a Lego competition down in the Twin Cities called the Great Create. And I've been playing with Legos and Duplos since I was old enough to pick things up and put them together. So my parents took me and my brothers and sister down there, and we all competed in our age groups, and we all made it through the first round of judging with our creations that used just random pieces. But I actually made third place in my age category, so that was a huge accomplishment for a kid like me back then. And I was like, wow, I can actually do something with this creativity.
Wow, that is amazing. So you won third place.
Third place, and I got a Lego set of a space rocket. Went home and built that.
Okay, so you had told me earlier when we were chatting that your time in grade school was an opportunity for you to really draw upon the expressive and creative arts and to help you through some challenges that you had. What was going on in grade school before you came to this place here and won the third place?
See, in grade school, I actually faced a lot of bullying. It was a small school, so there wasn't a lot of other places to hide. And me and my siblings were we all went through some level of bullying. And the way I would cope with it was with books. I wasn't writing a lot at that time, even though would occasionally tell Dad about this book I want to write or that book I want to write. But I would actually find myself reading a lot, and books helped me to retreat from the problems that I was facing, but also like equip me to get back into the fray. Like the books would remind me that it's better not to strike back, even though it hurts, because there are better things if you restrain yourself. There was also like, here's how you can deal with bullies that all they do is name call you. You can basically disarm them by not letting them have that power over you, and eventually they'll just have nothing. So I learned all these things from books. Like my parents taught me these things, but really like diving into stories helped me figure out how to make it work in my life. Like seeing someone else doing it helped me better do it myself.
And so, were you reading fairy tales or adventure stories with heroes, or what kind of books were you reading?
Adventures.
Mhm.
I read some fairy tales, but a lot of it was adventures, outer space, science fiction, uh, dragons. There was a favorite series of mine called The Dragon Riders of Pern, and that was one of those that helped me really see what a powerful story can help teach and encourage someone with, like putting courage in you type of encouragement. So um, those were
I
the
love
sorts of
that.
stories I would read.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And just growing up with a parent that reads to a child, I think is so important. And I know you had that. Was it your mother that read to you?
It was both. My mother read the first little golden books to me. My father actually, over about a year, he read the entire Lord of the Rings to us kids. And that
Wow.
was, yeah, that was my
Yeah.
first engagement with like big, huge, epic stories. And like that was, those were my first heroes.
So why were the kids bullying you?
It's hard to say any particular reason other than that. I mean, they picked on how I would sing a lot. Like I
Uh-huh.
was my mom's star soprano for a while until I became her star bass overnight.
Oh,
So I get picked on for singing. I get picked on for being overweight. I'd get picked on for not being athletic. I'd get picked on for like doing, you know, how some people talk to themselves. As a kid, I would also like act to myself.
yes. Mhm.
Uh, and then just being the new kid in a school, and one person's mother took a real like dislike to my dad for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And so her son took a dislike to us, and everybody just followed his lead.
Yeah.
So, um,
I'm sorry to hear that, but that happens, especially with creative kids. Yeah, they get picked on because they're different, unique.
mhm.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some more of these pictures here. Explain to us what we're looking at here.
Ah, about the year 2002, I came across Technic Lego pieces, which were more like less like blocks and more really meant to move. And that really expanded what I was capable of creating. And this actually, some years later, using parts from like Bionicle and Lego Star Wars and like a dozen other things, this was the best robot I ever made. It was like it stood on its own 2 feet. It was about a foot and a half tall. It had a large gun arm that we took off later because part of it broke, but it had fully articulate hands. It had hair. It had a face, like neck, torso. All of it could move, and you could, you know, pose it. And that was a favorite creation of ours, and we actually kept it up until we took it apart 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. And you say we, who is we?
Me and my brothers, we're
Okay.
all some kind of creative, but I'm the only one who's really continued pursuing it and building it as a skill.
So tell me, how many children, how many siblings?
All right, it's five siblings. So there's my older sister, then me, then two younger brothers, and the youngest sister.
Yeah. And they're all creative.
In their own ways. My sister
Mhm.
writes poetry. Well, sorry, my older sister writes poetry. My younger brother, the middle brother, he works. Uh, he's a lot more like upfront personality, like very outgoing, also very good at performance stuff, good at ad libbing, and very warm and creative. Youngest brother I keep telling him he should try to get his stuff published because he's just a really, really clever writer.
Oh, mhm.
Like we'll send each other texts back and forth with spoofy song lyrics or silly jokes, and he can just make me laugh anytime. My
Yeah,
youngest
that's
sister,
great.
yeah, my youngest sister is a singer. I mean, all of us sing
Oh,
to some degree. She's a singer, and uh, she reads a lot. She does a little bit of costuming with us, but
mhm.
she also just finds ways to combine fashion pieces to make very unique looks.
Yes. Well, let's take a look at some more pictures here. And I take it you love Halloween. There's several pictures of costumes. We have this one.
Yep, that was a costume that I put together my first year in college, and yeah, that was a blast.
And this looks fascinating. Tell us about this.
This is it's what's called a cosplay, a costume play, and it's from a Japanese animated show called Hellsing Ultimate, and it's about vampires and Nazis and immortals and werewolves. It's bonkers, crazy fun, and yeah. So those were pieces that we modified to make those costumes, and we haven't stopped making costumes. There's just a ton of stuff we
Well,
have in our house.
you're talking about costume and playing and Legos and all these different things, but the golden thread connecting everything is the creative imagination. And I'm just seeing that in overflow here from childhood to adulthood. And even in your marriage, your wife is playing along with you and you're enjoying and you're really tapping into that creative imagination and having fun. And that's so important, whether you're a dancer or writer or whatever, you're a musician. That's so important to keep that creative imagination door open, and that's what you're doing there. So I love it. Let's look here. Here we go again. More creativity here. This is awesome. What's happening here?
Actually, this costume didn't get made for about 5 years after I first had the idea. Was I wanted to be a haunted house, like basically the full embodiment of Halloween. I made the cravat. I attached the ruffles to the sleeves. And this was one where I didn't make much except for the cravat, the sleeves, and modified the hat. But I put everything together so that it looked like I was the walking embodiment of a haunted house.
Oh, yes. There you go. And look at the skeleton hands and the pocket. And, yeah, lots of stuff. Caution tape across your chest. Is that the window on your hat?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
there you
And
go.
and in the dark, there's actually a cauldron with a light, and I turn on the light in there, and the cauldron like flashes colors, and you can see it hanging in there.
What fun. Okay. There's a shifting here and it says writing. So we've been looking at these pictures of you growing up, having fun with Legos, making robots, making Halloween costumes, having a great time, being highly creative. And now we're shifting here and something happened and your writing passion is coming through and in a very serious way. When did that happen? And tell me more about that.
There you see my laptop, which is, I ended up having to get a laptop because I started getting ideas faster than I could write them down on paper. I still use the notebook, as you see there, for taking notes about like where I want a scene to go or character ideas or how to get one piece or another to work. And then, I'll go from my notebook right onto my laptop. And so that's really my focus these days is uh, writing as an expressive art. I have a blog that I've been working on I've been blogging daily for 3 years now, just
Mm-hmm.
like pounding out content. And I also write novels. I have, what, two or three full-length finished stories just on my blog. One of them is a fan fiction for the Legend of Zelda video games. And I wrote a fan fiction of it and put it on the blog. So I'm like, I don't feel like trying to get the right licenses to get this properly published. And I want to get this to my readers a lot faster. So I just put the whole thing together, and it's just a fan fiction there. And it gave me the opportunity to practice skills that I put in my other books, like character development, long form story, plot lines, world adaptations. So
Yeah. So, how long have you been writing in this manner, with really focused on completing works? You say you have several novels and you have fan stories. And how long have you really been actively writing, or has it been most of your life?
in grade school, I was, my mom handed me a notebook just for writing in, and I'd fill that thing up in like 2 months. Oh, it was short stories. It was little funny punchline stories. I didn't have too much long form until I got to high school, and I started really filling up on large stories, and then what I filled up on, I eventually put out.
Yes. So you had told me that writing has been really helpful to you, in a very special way. And the name of this program is Courageous Creative Conquerors. So how has creative writing helped you conquer something in your life? What obstacles did you overcome? And how did writing help you?
Well, it helped me with I, I would say just my help me dealing with my emotions. My
Mm-hmm.
first book, Mather's Odds, I actually ended up writing it based starting off of I had a crush on a girl that I worked a summer job with, and it was just driving me bonkers, and I had no idea how to deal with it. And so I started writing this character who was also going through these struggles. And I'm like, I didn't just want to write a teenage hopeless romance. And there I thought, wait a second, I had this other idea of like controlling the physics and the formulas of the world. So I added that one in there. Then there were a couple other scenes and a couple other like ideas like the silent war and glass knives. And it all just came together in this book. And writing this book helped me really delve into what my emotions were doing to me, where they were helpful and where they were harmful. And
Yes.
that helped me, like getting that book written and even published was the big thing that helped me understand and learn how to deal with and overcome the emotions that would just like flood me.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I've had trauma and challenges with, emotions, throughout my life, and creative writing has always been there to help me. Journaling, and storytelling, and poetry, and of course music and the other arts too. And I'm so grateful that you shared that, because we've got people watching this program who can identify with what you're saying, and it is a very powerful coping strategy and also a healing strategy. And that's, I think, what you're saying, that it can shift and change your life and empower you when you finish that creative work. It's just a really remarkable tool. So thank you for sharing about that. There's a series of photos here with you outdoors. How important is nature to you, and being outside and exploring in this way? And why were you doing it?
Even though I had written about friends, I'd written about people in the mountains or things going on in the mountains I had never really walked the mountains myself or seen the different kinds of places that I described. So I'm like, yes, I want to go out to Glacier National Park, to Yosemite, all those places, and not just calm down and collect myself in nature, but also really experience these things that I had only written about before. Like there's this descriptive knowledge that you have a lot better when you've actually been there as opposed to when you're just
Yeah.
like imagining it.
It's one thing to write about it from looking at pictures online, and it's another thing to go there and actually feel, and when you breathe, to breathe in the mist from the waterfall and hear the roar of it and everything, and feel the cool air and trek around near it and everything.
It was an absolute blast. And
Yeah.
we decided we're good, just gonna keep doing stuff like that. We are not
Yeah.
letting our national parks pass. We're not letting that lapse at all.
Look at you there. Mount
Yeah.
Rainier in Washington in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. So here we go. Here's your book, Mather's Odds. So that happened in what year was that?
In 2020, and it was ready to go by 2018. So
Okay.
that's me holding a library copy of it that
Yes, I noticed
a
that
friend of
library.
mine.
That's so exciting to have it in the library. How exciting. Mather's Odds. Just, a few sentences. Tell us about this book.
Uh, I had an impossible time defining this book when I was first asked because it's like an alternate world fiction. They have similar buildings, similar architecture, similar technology to us. So they have like cell phones, motorcycles, trucks, universities, but their history and the theology and the background behind it all is so very different. The majority of the story takes place in a city called Crater City, and it's a city in a crater where there's almost never any sunshine. And there are buildings there that were impossible to design, and yet they still stand. And there are situations that people have to deal with where there are these godlike beings that are each in control of a certain branch of emotions. There's a whole group of people who have this ability to imagine the world a different way and make it that way. And so there are pieces that feel like science fiction, and there are pieces that feel like fantasy, and I had no idea how to describe it.
So, if you had to say one sentence of maybe a powerful message or lesson that is the theme of this book, a lesson for the reader, what would it be?
You always have some control over your life, and from there you can control all of it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Now that's a great lesson. That's a great lesson. And doesn't that tie in with what you're trying to do now, what you are doing now, helping other creatives? I saw on your Amazon page with this book, it says, I teach writers and creators how to find and empower their uniqueness.
Yes.
Tell me about that. How do you teach other people to find and empower their uniqueness?
Well, a lot of it actually is unteaching them like mental ruts and bad advice, or even unteaching them to follow a lot of advice. And I can definitely understand that, what with the take something old, make something new. But so much of the advice that I work with is getting them to think about not the way they thought about it before. There was, I belong to a couple of different writers' advice pages, and there was one recently who said, I don't know what to do about this because it's like an army of the damned, undead soldiers thing. But I don't want to name them something that's just the same old, zombie army, army of lost souls. What do I do? And I said, a lot of people said, well, here's a variety of different um, synonyms for it. And I said, well, let's look at a couple things here. First of all, what's the mechanic by which they are being, like, what is it about them? Is it they sold their souls to the devil? There's some chemical virus, or what is it? And then I said, what you can do also is, instead of describing them, have a place that they came from. It's like, oh, that's one of the Timberton boys, and you stay away from them. And the name Timberton doesn't tell you that it's a zombie or a lost soul or anything, but it gives you something different to start with, because then it also adds a story to what's going on behind them. Like, this originated in a place, or it's this religious cult that just went completely bonkers or something. And I said, if you think not in terms of what it is, but better in terms of where it came from or what it used to be, that can be another way to approach it. So that's a lot of what I do when I work with writers. Is I tell them, have you tried not thinking about it the way you're currently thinking about it? And I offer suggestions, and I tell them, you don't have to do it this way, but this is a good place to start. You can go somewhere else with it if you want to, but this is a place to start.
Okay. So you meet with them on Zoom or online chatting with them,
Yeah.
and you listen and find out what they're working on, and you offer tips and strategies, ways for them to really tune into what they want to do, what their talents are, and how to set a goal and get that accomplished. Is that what you do? You help them? Yeah, okay. How about we take this time right here and you give me 3 very brief tips or techniques that could help a creative writer if they're blocked. What do you have for us?
All right. The first one is the technique that really helped me unlock my abilities. I call it the Pareto Blitz. It's off of the 80-20 rule. And the way it works is, more effort is put into starting something than into bringing it to completion. You do 80% of the work in 20% of the time. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, what if if I'm stuck, I don't try to find one way and develop it. I try to find like 5 different ways. It can be like, mathematically, you're 400% more productive if you restart 5 times. So that's where I developed the Pareto Blitz. You can call it starting 5 times, where you go a completely different direction. You set a 1-minute timer and you have 1 minute to just list out different ways it could go. Like, the door could be locked, the window could be locked, there could be a wolf, chasing you down, and you just list out a bunch of different things. Because usually once you get past the obvious ones, you get to the interesting ones. So that's my biggest creative tip. My second one, I would say, is called Be Afraid. And that doesn't mean you do something that, is scary, but that you say, what is the phrase, or what is the project, or what is the step that most scares me to do? And you do that.
Yes, I use that technique. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one.
And yeah, because it's not about doing the most, it's not about doing the most vulnerable thing. It's about finding the area that has the most potential to do good for you, because that's also the area that has the potential to do the most harm. So you have to be ready to fail, but do the thing that makes you afraid. So it could be asking a friend for help. It could be working on that project that's bigger than you expect it to be. It could be skipping this one chapter and going right to the next chapter. You're afraid you won't be able to come back and finish it. Do it.
Yeah.
Having the habit of facing your fear is far better than like having the habit of skipping it and trying to do something easier. Always do what makes you afraid.
I think that's a great tip. I did that today. I had been putting off writing the preface, which I didn't really have any interest in doing at all. And I faced that fear, and it feels so good, even though there's more to do with it. But there were some really great gains, and I think I pretty much laid it out and finished it. Just some editing there, minor editing. But when we do something that we're afraid of or that we just really don't like at all, it really breaks through barriers and boosts our confidence and makes it easier the next time around, so.
Like courage is a habit and a skill, and you want to build them both up for the times it's going to matter.
Yes. Yes.
The third tip is one that is exactly counterintuitive, and I call it backwards. If you find something isn't working going forwards, what you can do is break down the list of events and reverse them and see if that helps you out instead. I did that when I reviewed a video game called Kingdom Hearts 3. I was a fan of 1 and 2 and some of the games in between, but Kingdom Hearts 3 just did not work for me story-wise. And I went, why didn't it work? How would I have written it better? And I realized, wait a second, if I reverse the order of all of the events in here, it's not like you reverse your word count or anything, but you break it down into the attendant parts, and you just reverse them, and you see how that changes it. Because oftentimes, like I do this when I'm writing song lyrics, I do this when I'm stuck on how to write a chapter for one of my stories. A lot of times the problem is we started with something that should be at the end, and we want to end it with something that should be at the beginning. So
that's a great tip. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's exactly counterintuitive because it's literally thinking, what can I do? And doing it backwards.
That's a good writing tip. I mean, specifically, if you're writing a paragraph and it's just feeling awkward, musically awkward, like the rhythm is off with the words or something's wrong, you just take the words and shift them around or move the sentences in a different order, and then it just sparkles and it takes on a new feeling. And that's what we need to do, just shift it around. Yeah. Thank you for encouraging people out there. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your journey and telling us how the expressive arts have helped you and changed your life, and for offering help to those people out there, those creatives that need someone to help them and guide them. You're there for them. And we really had a great time with you today, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure to be here.
It's been so much fun getting to know you, Chris. And thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
To see more Courageous Creative Conquerors videos, join the weekly creative community calls, or learn more about private sessions, visit jeanvoicedart.com.